Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you for
Hello,
joining.
everyone.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to talk about how AI is enabling the business case for primary carbon data. We're going to get started in just a moment, letting people trickle in. But I did want to share that this is our very, very first time using this Zoho platform. I don't know if anyone else heard that automated voice when we joined. So bear with us if there's any technical difficulties. This may also be your first time using the Zoho platform. Let us know. You can hear us in the chat. Want to make sure everything's working okay. I think you'll have a few buttons on your screen, a Q&A button. You should see that. You can submit questions to us. You should also hear a chat button. Have a chat button. And you might even have a little emoji button at the bottom that you can use to react throughout the webinar. So why doesn't someone test that out for us too? I want to see it in action. You can go ahead. There we go. Thumbs up. Thanks everyone for helping us out there. It's really exciting to have you here today. So we're going to get started. Geza, why don't you pull up your screen and we can dive into things.
Let's do that. Does it show? Do you see my screen?
Yeah, we're getting there. We'll go to slide 2. So to introduce myself very briefly, I'm Lior. I'm the Chief of Staff at Carbon Space. Geza is our main presenter for today, and I'll pass it on to him in a moment, but I just have a little bit more housekeeping to do. We have 45 minutes together today, and about 20 minutes of that is going to be a presentation. And we also want to make sure we have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. We've already gotten some questions in advance. We want to cover those that come in live. So at any point during the presentation, if you have questions, you can click that Q&A button and submit them for us. And more so than questions, if you also have ideas for future webinars, we're getting this program off the ground and we want to make sure we're highlighting the content that you want to see. So let us know in the Q&A, let us know in the chat, and we will take that strongly into consideration. Finally, the webinar is recorded. So if you have to leave for any reason, don't worry, you'll get the recording in your inbox in the next few days. Let's go to the next slide here. We're going to be talking about business case for primary carbon data today and how AI is really paving the way for more robust business cases. And the truth is that as technology continues to advance, as carbon monitoring becomes cheaper, more accurate, and more scalable, the business case will only continue to grow. So before we fully dive into our topic, I actually have a question for everyone here in the audience. I'm going to launch a poll. So you should see a poll pop up on your screen now. I personally want to know, we want to know how familiar you are with AI for carbon monitoring. Maybe you're extremely familiar, maybe you use it. Maybe you're unfamiliar, you haven't used it, you haven't really heard of it. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle. I think a lot of people will be somewhere in the middle. So put in your vote there. I also know we have a ton of employees in the chat, so feel free to vote too, but you might skew the data a bit. I'll let people respond to that question, and then we'll share the results. But in the meantime, we can go to the next slide and I'll share more about what we'll cover today. So we're going to start by looking at what the status quo is in carbon monitoring. How are things being done today? And more importantly, how is it going? Then we'll talk about how an AI is enabling new opportunities, and we'll go through a couple case studies so we can really see that in action. And finally, we'll have that Q&A time at the end. If you haven't gotten your votes in yet, feel free to do so. I'm going to publish the results so everyone can see what it looks like. So you should see this on your screen now. 2 is the most voted answer. It seems like people are, more on the low medium side of kind of familiarity with AI applications and carbon monitoring, and that is totally fine. This is probably the perfect webinar for you, because we're going to go deeper into the advancements that have been made possible in recent years. And if you're already super familiar, this can be a refresher for you. So I'll pass it on to Geza to kick us off.
Yeah, thanks, Lior. Thanks for the intro, and thanks for the getting this started also with the poll and with the participants. Indeed, this was our intention to let's start a series of discussions because we get so many questions at Carbon Space over the past years. What's the point in AI? What kind of AI tools do you use? And where are the differentiators? So we thought it's important to talk about these topics, not only posting some chats on LinkedIn, commenting on this. So we gathered a lot of knowledge over the past 4 or 5 years and would like to share this with you. So would like to kick this off perhaps in a form of a series of discussions. And it was not easy to choose the first topic for today, but I think this is the best way to approach it. This is the hype of the day. This is what everybody talking about. So we'd like to shed some lights on it, how we are using it. So by way of introduction, my name is Giza. I am the CEO of Carbon Space. I came to Carbon Space about 3 years ago as an investor myself and became the CEO shortly after that. I'm an agronomist and a climate scientist by education, and I spent the past 15 years before coming to Carbon Space in the food and ag space, where I was working with the Ferrero, Nestle, Barry Callebaut, managing carbon and forest programs, have some hands-on experience with carbon project development too. But my true interest was in food and beverage and supply chain sustainability. So I gathered quite some knowledge there. And I would like to share a couple of examples from my experience as we go along with the presentation. And we'll start from actually the true reason why I came to Carbon Space. So especially for the past couple of years before starting my startup career in a quite a later stage, I spent time with safeguarding investments in region ag, in agroforestry implementation, restoration projects. And we've been benchmarking with our teams and the clients across all the possible MRV solutions that were available at that time, say 4 or 5 years ago. Why? Because we realized that planting trees is one thing, but understanding what are the carbon implications, what were the baseline conditions, and how to actually measure as real time as possible those trees, that was a struggle. It was already possible, but it was really expensive to visit all the fields. So I got absolutely enthusiastic about the tech innovation that is enabling this, especially if we can use machine learning, we can visit every place without actually going on the field. So here is what I think about legacy approaches, and that's what we want to disrupt here at Carbon Space. Mainstream carbon monitoring is manual, it's expensive, and it's rather forgiving on human bias and errors. We went on the field, we employed hundreds of people, taking some kind of sampled approach and measure basically above ground biomass, or later stage take soil samples. It was absolutely not scalable and not transparent. Now, some accounting systems can live with it, but overall it doesn't safeguard those investments. Then the business case for sustainability was lacking compliance and trust. These investments, so those who really have the skin in the game and put the financing into planting those trees, providing living income contributions, carbon premiums for the farmers, they were not protected. So the investments didn't have these safeguards. And what the data was good, well, it helped greenwashing and to avoid fines, but not more than that. We also had limited data on the weaknesses and strengths, so there was no idea where to improve, how farmers are performing. So when you take samples, you really don't have an idea about 10,000 farmers. It would have been nice to be able to visit every farmer every month at least, or every day. So basically the MRV budgets were taking away money from investments. Less money was going on the ground and more money was going into monitoring these areas, which were not really safe. So looking ahead of new innovations, what did we learn in the past couple of years? Carbon monitoring can be granular. It can be fully digital. We can use automation and machine learning. And while it can significantly increase accuracy and the lack of bias. The business case for sustainability needs to rest in a proven return on investment. Else, the investments don't scale, investments don't find those safeguards. And this is the number one business case enabler what we need. It is possible that with innovation, we have robust data about how our interventions and investments are performing. So measurements are instantly verified and actionable. That was a dream a few years ago, but today it is possible. So real-time data, verified data can be actionable. So would like to talk about a bit more about the current status quo, because I was using some introductory words about this, but what does it mean in practice? So the current practice mainly relies on individual pool accounting. We basically want to know how the ecosystem performs because the climate impact of a hectare of land is due to that ecosystem. The ecosystem consists of above ground biomass, below ground biomass, soil organic pool, and of course dead organic matter, and some other pools that are less significant, fungal biomass and others. But overall, we need to take several measurements of the ecosystem if we want to have the comprehensive picture. But here is the challenge. By definition, we accumulate errors. And today, when we accumulate all these errors, if we want to have the comprehensive ecosystem carbon sequestration or the emissions measured, we accumulate up to 150% errors. And in some greenhouse gas cases, this can be much higher, up to 300, 400%. So clearly a better monitoring system is needed because we want to understand how the complexity of the ecosystem can be measured, how we tackle this complexity. So what does it mean in terms of the lack of business case? So with these uncertainties, whether we talk about supply chain, food supply chain monitoring or carbon credits, there were quite a few issues in the past. We heard about quite a few studies that the majority of the carbon offsets were found non-performing or overestimating, whether on the baseline measurement or the actual measurement of the incremental change. The methods keep being costly and inaccurate. It's mainly because it's based on sampling, whether above ground biomass or soil. Sampling methods by definition are not actionable. And of course, high operation cost because on-ground collection and verification is costly. And this can be a challenge to scale across millions of acres. To summarize, artificial intelligence today is mainly used for better extrapolation. And this can help in reporting, but is not a cure. So whether we rely on sampling and we link artificial intelligence with that, or we stick to sampling methods, the cost efficiency doesn't change and the business case doesn't increase. The fact is that the root cause of MRV problems, or monitoring, reporting, verification problems, need to be disrupted. And only then we can de-risk investments. So this was the main driver when I said that I'm happy to devote my 100% in this cause because I do see the possibility. I do see MRV solutions that can help tackle the root cause of these problems and not just provide a cure. Just want to pull up this snapshot before we move on, and I will hand on to Lior to talk a bit more about machine learning. This is an internal assessment, but it's important to talk a few numbers. So the estimated financial losses due to inaccurate carbon MRV are significant. There is a couple of names here. Don't get stuck with this. The fact is that even when we don't talk about penalties, the estimated financial losses due to not having accurate data about what affecting the yield, about climate resilience, the true carbon strength of supply chains is significant. And that's true also for nature-based solutions. So this is the opportunity. As we introduce the business case in machine learning and AI, you need to understand that there are both a risk management opportunity as well as premium generation opportunities. So over to you, Lior, to talk about the business case with AI and what machine learning actually means in the MRV systems.
Thanks, Geza. I think that was well said too, that it's both compliance and opportunity. It works on both ends. You know, how do we make carbon monitoring digital, automated, accurate, and scalable so we can really resolve some of these problems that Geza highlighted? Machine learning is hardly new. It's been around for a long time, but there's definitely been a kind of surge in the last 5 years of applications. And machine learning has the ability to harness and process millions of data points in an instant and simply do what humans can't. It can review and combine various data sources, and it can also improve over time, hence learning, resulting in better results. And what this means is that on-site visits, manual sampling, a lot of these legacy methods can be optimized by AI. You know, as I mentioned, it's not always about replacing these approaches. Yes, there's a revolution happening, but we can also optimize and use AI and machine learning to make steps towards these accuracy and the affordability. With the cost savings inherent in these technologies, the business case also becomes a lot more salient. Lower costs lead to more savings, allowing more money to be invested back into projects or higher margins to be found on the other end. And lower margins also enable the ability to claim more carbon on projects because they eliminate the need for some of those conservative buffers that are so important when you can't fully rely on your data. The ability to verify data in a streamlined way is also going to back up sustainability premiums and investments and make that process more straightforward. So these are just some of the ways that using AI for primary carbon data can strengthen the business case for sustainability. And perhaps most importantly, AI also unlocks different timescales for receiving data. Instead of going on site every couple of years and taking a representative sample, as Geza said, data can be taken on a near real-time basis, so you can know how your investments are performing right now, not 3 years from now when it might be too late. This is really critical, so you can catch issues before they occur, correct course, and forecast with more confidence, unlocking, more pathways to investment as well as we de-risk these initiatives. So, the other part of the conversation, we're talking about how AI facilitates these business cases, but we also came here to talk about primary carbon data and its role in this. So what is primary carbon data? How does it compare to conventional carbon data? Geza will talk a bit more about that. What we do at Carbon Space is we do primary carbon data in the form of an ecosystem measurement, and we can compare that to conventional methods. I lost your audio, Geza.
Yeah, thanks, Lior. To get to the bottom of this straight away, I would like to provide a bit of comparison here. So let's compare mainstream versus ecosystem level monitoring system that actually use machine learning. And here you will see the true benefit of this. So today, in most cases, we rely on going on the field. Now, we visit those fields. We visit mainly samples. We can do tree counting. We can do above ground biomass measurements. We can do precision soil sampling, which are, of course, costly. Now, sampling and going on the field is not to go away because with remote sensing, you cannot understand the soil quality, soil health. So there is coexistence with sampling methods. But as I like to refer to this, there are many reasons to go visit farmers, and most importantly, you can engage with the farmers. You can understand who are the champion farmers, where they are lacking behind, how to motivate them, understand their issues. But when it's about carbon, one can rely on ecosystem level diagnostics today. Why diagnostics here? Because as I will show in the next graph, we need to look at the data that is available on a daily basis. If we want to understand the dynamics, it's not enough to do an annual validation or occasional or sample-based visits. But you would think that, well, then 365 days we can't do this. But the fact is that with this anticipated accuracy and scalability, we can go down below €1 per hectare cost, whereas the conventional methods and the visits are there to stay. And with wages increasing, you can expect that the cost will go up, even when you optimize this with the help of AI methods and remote sensing. And I will compare why. Now, in terms of accuracy, as I introduced, this is way out of expectations. When you do ecosystem level diagnostics, when you take daily measurements, you can bring down the error to 20 to 5%. So this is really an order of magnitude more accurate. And if you support this with ground sensors and use that for calibration, you can really stick to that 5 to 10%. Now, in terms of value proposition, yes, the practices and the actionable data is important. So if you want to know cover crop, no-till, soil organic carbon change, the impact on biochar, you do need to take samples. But that's where the coexistence is there with systems that can drastically improve the accuracy and the cost efficiency of sampling. So when you have daily data at a granular level, at a 10-meter resolution for carbon, for evapotranspiration or other greenhouse gases, you can correlate this with agronomic use cases. When you have historical data, and we can talk about today with ecosystem level MRV going back to the year 2000, we can check resilience of the ecosystem, we can check the climate resilience of farming, which we are not able to detect if you go on the field. So we can detect degradation, we can detect, let's say, a consistent stage, and we can also detect incremental change in a much early stage. And I will give a couple of case studies today, because I think that's the best way to understand what this means in practice. Last but not least, it's about scalability. Sampling by definition is not scalable. It's scalable at the cost of accuracy, and it's simply a costly method. As I mentioned before, if you use samples and you use AI and machine learning to improve the extrapolation methods, it's only halfway done. It's still, there's a limit to grow in terms of accuracy. But when you do ecosystem level diagnostics of multiple data sets, you have a globally scalable method, you have a data and an approach that keeps learning, and it keeps getting cheaper. So I want to explain briefly, and I will not go much detail in this, because if you're interested in the tech behind carbon space, we have a peer-reviewed methodology. We can share the white paper, and there is numerous publications out there that you can deep dive into. But I would like to explain how we apply a unique combination of technologies to arrive to this cited accuracy, to be able to do diagnostics at that level. So we apply a unique combination of various high-resolution daily satellite data with highly accurate per-minute meteo data sets. These meteo data sets, like rainfall, temperature, solar radiation, and others, they have no gaps. They are highly accurate because they are available exposed. And we combine these. We basically put machine learning to work in order to achieve daily diagnostics of the ecosystem changes. And we are able to relate this to the influencing factors. So you can really think about taking diagnostics of the human body or on the ecosystem itself, where you need to take into account a couple of factors. The doctor is asking what happened, what was the overlaying pattern, what were the influencing factors, and then we put together a picture. So this picture is already super relevant because we understand what were the influencing factors and how the vegetation richness changes, what are the granular changes of the ecosystem. But then we need to convert it into carbon, and we calibrate this by precision sensory technology from eddy covariance ground stations. What you see here on the picture too, we'll zoom in there in a minute. These Eddy-covariance ground stations, so-called flux towers, they measure the rate of change of carbon dioxide in different atmospheric levels. They are a precision technology. They are available on representative land cover types and agroclimatic zones around the world. We install such sensory technologies in case there is a scarcity in a particular area, but we can guarantee that we will understand any ecosystem wherever we are in the world with the help of the combination of the satellite data and the meteo data, and with the ability to keep calibrating, to use machine learning to further calibrate and improve the accuracy by using today's most precise climate tech, which is the eddy-covariance ground stations. So the results are reliable, accurate, and scalable. The MRV system can be applied remotely to pretty much any place in the world and any land cover type, unless it's covered with water or snow. So we look at, of course, vegetation. And we can use this to baseline and measure real-time food supply chain systems and nature-based solutions. So basically, these towers, if you are not familiar with, we call them towers, but they can be anything from a 3 to 4 meter tall station up to 30 meters and above. It's important that they are above the canopy, above the ecosystem that you want to measure, or if you want to measure peatland emissions, then you keep it at the soil level. And they are taking measurements every second, multiple times. For days and years, they're able to block out the noise of the nearby ecosystems or nearby influences, and they can precisely measure what is the net ecosystem exchange, the sum of the emissions of that land, and the sequestration. So that's how ecosystem diagnostics are done. As I mentioned, if you want to deep dive into this, we are happy to take it offline. The primary aim of this webinar was not to go into the technology, but to explain the role of machine learning based fully remote direct measurements of atmospheric carbon. And if you think about it, this is really a very trivial way of looking at climate change. So climate change is all about reducing parts per million. And it's not about properly estimating carbon stock. We need to estimate carbon stock for forestry purposes, for forest management purposes, and it gives us a lot of information. We need to understand we need to take soil samples to understand the numerous qualities of soils. But when it's about the impact of that ecosystem on climate, we need to measure how much carbon was sequestered by that ecosystem and how much carbon was released. Ultimately, it comes down to this rather simplified method, the most obvious way to measure the impact of climate change, impact on climate change of these ecosystems. So I will move on, just take perhaps a minute on each of these 3 case studies. I selected these case studies from the 70 plus projects that we have in 41 countries today. But I wanted to focus again on this business case part. And after this, I'm pretty much done with the presentation. I would be really interested to hear your thoughts. So I have here 3 case studies. One is a reforestation project, where you can see here, so this is a snapshot from our user interface, data in action. These are annual carbon fluxes. Everything is green, so that means there is carbon sequestration that is bigger than emissions, else it would be red. So red are emissions. And that was a pretty good baseline condition, which we could measure. We could do diagnostics on the ecosystem, and we performed the scientific baseline establishment based on the ecosystem carbon sequestration. That is most relevant to understand compared to what you are increasing the carbon sequestration. And then with tree-in setting, we basically monitored year on year, or in fact, month on month, what was the project's impact. Now, we didn't start doing this 7, 8 years ago, or 10 years ago. we basically went back in time, because with our data, we can go back at any point in time, as I mentioned, all the way to the year 2000. We can set the baseline, and we can measure the impact of insetting and then generate verified reporting claims based on our data. Now, in this case, it was quite interesting, not only because we monitored that the annual carbon sequestration improved by over 200%, but we did a survival rate check, and we are able to detect 3 survival rates as early as 4 months, versus what I know from experience, it does take 2 or 3 years, even in tropical conditions, to have any meaningful remote sense-based estimation of the survival rate challenges. So imagine what this means in terms of business case for investors. It is groundbreaking to bring that down to just a couple of months. But interestingly, this study, our assessment was complemented by a study where field validation and tree count was performed, and the correlation with our data was above 95%. So basically, we performed granular monitoring on areas that were hardly accessible, and we didn't only generate reporting claims, we could point to the areas where actions was needed, where we had problems with survival rates. Another example is, well, we talk about soil, and I'm a soil health enthusiast myself, and I like all the interventions that go this direction. So in this case study, we observed the implementation of plantation management practices using biochar and compost mix as a soil amendment starting from the year 2012. And the soil organic carbon measurements really take 3 to 5 years, and of course a lot of sampling effort to understand if the soil carbon is indeed changing. But with our tech, we can demonstrate month on month that there is actually an increasing trend. And that's something, especially in the case of biochar, we can detect as early as 6 to 12 months. Now, of course, if it's combined with all other regenerative practices, it's a cumulative impact. But in terms of reporting claim, that's what you need. A very interesting story here is that this particular farmer cooperative, the farmers there, with this granular data, they managed to sell their products at a 30% premium. So that's a good example of business case. And by that, I come to the last one, talking a bit more about the smallholder farmers. During my career, I always liked to put on the boots, and as soon as we had business trips visiting plantations, couldn't wait to get out of the car and go visit the plantations, do a bit of hazelnut harvest, meet palm oil smallholders, meet cocoa farmers. Here is an interesting case study where our data provided reporting claims about performance of various smallholder farmer activities. So there was a conversion of to regenerative practices, going to organic practices in many cases. These direct measurements provided benefits for everyone across the value chain. The farmers who raised sustainability premiums and could prove that carbon sequestration happened compared to other farmers, because we visited every single farmer with our tech, so we compared 4,000 farmers. This unlocked capital. This is how the project managed to get additional funding. And data is negotiating power. You don't need to promise anything up front. You can use the facts, and you can show that your performance is much better than others. So fair incentives and rewards for these champion farmers, and strategic interventions for bottom percentile. That's a truly motivating example. Instead of expensive consultancies and transaction costs, these farmers were enabled to get benefits, but not only the farmers, also pretty much everyone across the value chain, because the bank who was interested and involved in this got credible data. but the organization who is leading the implementation could demonstrate the effectiveness on their measures, and that was an amazing implementation package. And of course, the manufacturers and retailers who ultimately use this product, who use sustainable palm oil, not only had reporting claims that was verified and they can copy paste in their reports, but they realized that there is more investment possibility here, and they wanted to scale this project further. I would really like to talk about a lot more case studies what we have, but for today I just wanted to scratch the surface of it. I hope you benefited from these examples and could make you a bit interested in the power of machine learning, how technology is put to practice, and enable sustainability on the ground in various use cases.
Thanks, Gaza. Thanks, everyone. That is the end of the presentation portion. We do have about 10 minutes to take your questions. And we had some questions come in before the webinar. I saw a bunch come in while we were presenting. So now is the time to get those questions in. We're here to answer them. And also, if you have ideas for future webinars, we're going to make this a regular thing. And we want to make sure we're talking about what would be helpful to you. So whether it's deeper on this topic, different aspects of it, or different topics, entirely, feel free to suggest that in the Q&A as well. And as you get your questions in, I'm just going to launch another poll. I like this poll function. I'm curious if relevant to you, if relevant to what you're doing, is your organization considering incorporating AI into their carbon monitoring? Feel free to answer that if it's relevant to you. I know we're really curious. And while those questions are coming in, well, those answers are coming in rather, I think we'll kick it off with our first question that came in before the webinar for you, Geza. With primary carbon data in AI, how does that turn into action? How do we turn that data into impact at the organizational level? How have you seen it done? I know we actually covered a bit of this in the business case, yeah.
Yeah, I recall this came in on LinkedIn. Well, a couple of years ago, we were disclosing net ecosystem exchange results, and we thought it would be obvious that people understand how to make it actionable. But then we learned over the past years that we need to go deeper in comparative assessment to make carbon sequestration data much more actionable. In the meantime, we engaged with with our sensory tech provider to be able to scale sensory tech, and we can go to agronomic use cases. But what we provide today at let's say 30-meter resolution granular net ecosystem exchange data, it can correlate with interventions. We have our user interface where we can rank 10,000 farmers based on their performance, based on their per hectare carbon sequestration or per pixel carbon sequestration. And we can filter by the number of interventions they had, hectare by hectare. We can identify weak plots and strong plots. And we can even check eligibility of those areas for carbon project development if we go back, say, 10, 15 years in past. And just one more example, as we had a very interesting mission to understand for ecological engineering point of view, which areas are suitable and not suitable after surface mining to plant trees and what type of trees. And it was a great learning curve for us too. With our net ecosystem exchange data, we could show where soil degradation after surface mining was really that bad that trees wouldn't survive. Where is the suitability for project development? Where is the eligibility in terms of 10 years of checking the impact and deforestation and the land cover change in the past 10 years. But importantly, there are trees that are already sequestering a lot, and you don't want to cut them down to put a carbon project on top. So there are many examples for actionable data when you take daily diagnostics.
Thanks, Gaza. I'm going to publish this result too of the poll. It's really interesting, especially compared to the first poll we took of who's currently using AI for carbon monitoring. It seems like a ton of people are really intending to quite strongly. It's exciting to see. We also have, I know we have 5 minutes left and a good deal of questions in the Q&A tab. So I'm going to go in order and we'll see how many we can get through. And if we don't get through them on the call, we'll reach out to you afterwards, make sure we get in touch with everyone. Someone is asking, an anonymous asker wants to know what our take is on investment in sustainability with the existing US administration. And the other part of the question is, are you using this methodology to develop other solutions outside of carbon? Kind of a two-part question there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, good data should survive any administration because it's not only about reporting claims, but it's about managing yields, potential climate stress, heat stress on plantation. There's so many use cases that if you focus on carbon only, it's difficult to match. And if you take samples, you really put so much effort in MRV, but you can't capture impacts beyond is not good. So yeah, we already see many use cases that are independent of carbon accounting. Now, ultimately, sustainability and transformation to more sustainable food and ag systems will also help climate change and helps adaptation to climate change. Can you remind me on the second question, Lever?
Using this methodology to develop solutions outside of carbon.
Yes. I think I mentioned a few, and it's just worth to note that with these eddy covariance stations, you can go for multiple greenhouse gases. You can go for methane and nitrous oxide, measure that locally, but importantly, measure evapotranspiration, so water fluxes. By that, you can, you can detect pest and disease outbreaks. You can measure your irrigation. You can manage your irrigation better.
Yeah, another question, which is quite interesting, that eddy covariance station data is biased towards regions like North America and Europe. So how do you account for this bias if you want to look at carbon flux in other regions like Central or South America or Southeast Asia or Africa? And then the other part of the question is, can one ground station in one country suffice? And I think the answer is no.
Yes, of course, the answer is no. Well, our principle is that no matter where we have projects, say we have experience in 41 countries, and I hope it will keep growing. Our ultimate value proposition is that we can provide the maximum accuracy. We rely on the latest technology, and in the future we will take a new type of satellites, new data stack in we will consider, and then we will see how many flux towers are there and how many flux tower more we need. It's also in Europe, in North America, there are land cover types, crop types, where the spread of the towers are not so good. In West Africa, there is scarcity of towers. In many places in Southeast Asia and Latin America too. So the approach remains the same. The return on investment with the data remains the same, but in some cases, you need more sensory tech installations, at least for a year or two, and in other cases you don't. We see that in the case of any project, the return on investment, even on the hardware, is very, very short term because of the accuracy and the reliability.
Do you think we have time for one more question in 1 minute? Because there's a pretty good one here, and then we'll wrap up.
I think let's try to.
Yeah, someone's asking about Vera and gold standard, because today they rely on soil-based methodology and might not be thinking about atmospheric methodology. And the person's asking, could these two technologies coexist to reduce errors and help avoid greenwashing? Can it all coexist?
Yeah, that would be in the term that I would use. The technologies coexist and they are not going away. If possible, we need to minimize the time spent on going on the fields and not spending it with the farmers. So if you go visit the fields, we should do biodiversity assessment, spend time with the farmers. The coexistence with these individual pool accounting exists, but we need to see where we can optimize it. And one example is that with the net ecosystem exchange data, we can drastically optimize soil sampling too. We can point to to the weak spots, strong spots, and soil sampling itself can be optimized with our method, with such methods.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a quick answer. We have so many questions. We'll follow up with you all, but thank you again for joining us today. Thanks, Geza, of course, for your time. I know how busy everyone is. And I hope you have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you for the ideas for future webinars, and we'll be in touch with the recording and more information in the coming days. So enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. We kept the Swiss clock here with this meeting, but any of your questions that was not answered, we will definitely revert. Thank you for your attention. Thanks, Leo, for joining me today. Have a good day, everyone.
Bye.